Okay, good morning, class. Today we are working on CO24. I can find the least common multiple of a set of numbers. Now this one gets easily confused with yesterday's objective of greatest common factor. Remember, those greatest common factors are the numbers that we multiply together to get to our number. This is the least common multiple. So those factors are the numbers that goes evenly into the given number. So yesterday we were working with factors. Today we're going to work with the multiples. Multiples are numbers a given number can go into. We do skip counting to find the multiples. So greatest common factor, we find factor pairs. Least common multiple, we are going to skip count. We're going to multiply our number by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5. So we're multiplying up, whereas greatest common factor, we were breaking it down into the small factors. So yesterday we worked with factors. Today we are working with the multiples. Numbers a given number can go into. So it's important to note the difference between the two. So again, the factors are a number that goes evenly into the given number, whereas a multiple are numbers a given number can go into. They're opposites. Greatest common factor, we're breaking it down. Least common multiple, we are multiplying up. So let's look at factors versus multiples because we need to know the difference. So if we have factors of 8 versus multiples of 8, for the factors of 8, we would want to have those numbers that we can go evenly up into 8, what their factor pairs are. So factors of 8 would be 1 times 8, 2 times 4. Those are our factors, the numbers that we multiply to get to 8. That is different than our multiples of 8. Multiples of 8, we are going to skip count by 8s. 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3. So multiples of 8 would be 8, 16, 24, 32. Very, very different types of numbers. If you're asked for the greatest common factor, you know you are breaking it down into a small number. If you're asked for the least common multiple, you are multiplying up to a bigger number. So for the 8, the factors are all 8 or less. For the multiples of 8, they are 8 or greater. So what are the factors for 6? Who can tell me what the factors for 6 would be? Adeline. 1 and 6. What would be another one, Bridget? 2 and 3. Those are our factors of 6. What would be multiples of 6? Bridget? So we always start at the beginning. Yeah, so that would be what? 6. What would our next multiple of 6 be, James?
6 times 2.
Which is?
12.
What's the next one? 18. The next one, 24. Then we have 30. We are multiplying them up. 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4, 6 times 5. Those are the multiples. You go in order. Just like if we were skip counting by 6s, it's the same thing as 6 times all the numbers. Go in order though. 6, 12, 18, 24, 36. Okay? So when we're looking at our multiples, always multiply up in order. So now we can see that difference between factors and multiples. Factors the number is the highest factor, 6, and everything else is smaller. For a multiple, that 6 is the smallest number, everything else is bigger. So next up, we need to figure out finding the least common multiple when we're working with more than one number. Okay, we can do the factors and the multiples with one number. Now we're going to find that least common multiple like we did with the greatest common factor. So one way to find a least common multiple is to use the listing method. That's very similar to listing with the greatest common factor. We are going to list, not factors this time. What do you think we're going to list of our numbers, Nolan? They're multiples, and we're going to write them going up. So our first one here, for least common multiple, the first step you want to do is write the multiples. Then we do an MCL. Then we find what they have in common. And then we're going to find the least, the smallest one. So let's do 4 and 6. We want to find that least common multiple. The least common multiple of 4 and 6. So what's our first step? I think you know it, Jack. You want to raise your hand. What's our first step going to be? Yeah, we're going to do the multiples. We start with timesing by 1. So 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 4 times 3, 4 times 4, 4 times 5, 4 times 6, 4 times 7. Sometimes you can just do a smaller one of listing. Sometimes we need to go back and add to our list because that least common multiple is going to be much bigger. So this is what I had room for on the top row, so I'm going to stop there and see if I have to go any farther. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my 6's. So I'm going to start with 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4, 6 times 5, 6 times 6. Okay, so I listed a bunch of multiples for the 4, and I listed multiples for the 6. Now I'm going to go see which ones they have in common. Who can tell me a number that 4 and 6 have multiples in common of? Liam? 12. We see 12s for both of them. What other number do they have in common? Emma? 24. So just on those few multiples that I listed out, I've already found 2 common multiples. My last step is to decide which one is the least. What would be the least common multiple? What do you think, Sarah? What would be the least common multiple? 12. That is the smaller of the 2 numbers. So my least common multiple would be 12. So when we do that listing method, we're listing out multiples. Sometimes you'll list out multiples and say, well, Miss Gambino, I didn't find any in common. And then I'll say, you have to keep going. List out farther. So maybe you have to go up to 10. Maybe you have to go up to times 12. Sometimes you have to continue your list out a longer way to find one that they have in common. So our next step is the least common multiple as a table. So we're going to do the table method like we did with the greatest common factor with a twist. Okay, so it's not going to be exactly the same way, because if we did it the same way, we'd just be finding the greatest common factor. There's a twist to find the least common multiple. So let's do that 4 and 6 like that we had just done. What number can I pull out of 4 and 6? Adeline? a 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 6. Well, when it was I can't divide anything out of the 2 and 3. When it was the greatest common factor, we just multiplied the numbers we pulled out. For the least common multiple, we're going to make an L. And we're going to also multiply the bottom row. So I have a 2 times a 2 times a 3. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. So just like over here with the listing method, I found our least common multiple was 12. It was the same thing for the table method. So it's different than the greatest common factor because we're not just doing the numbers on the left. We are circling to make an L. All the numbers on the left that we pull out and the very bottom row. James?
Can we say 3 to the power of 2?
What you're doing is telling me the answer. Okay, so you don't have to tell me this part because it's not prime factorization.
Okay.
It's just telling me the answer. So you're going to actually do the math. Okay. All right, so now we are going to use the listing method to find the least common multiple for these 3 numbers. So we're doing the listing method. So if we do 6 and 8, I'm going to put a 6 here and an 8 here. What's my first step with the listing method? Emma?
12 by 1. Well, 6.
6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4, 6 times 5, 6 times 6. That's what I have room for right now, so I'm going to stop and I'm going to see if I have to go any farther. So now I'm going to do the same thing with my 8s, and I'm going to list out my 8s. 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, 8 times 4, 8 times 5, 8 times 6. Now what's my next step? Emma? See if we have any numbers in common. Does anybody see a common multiple? Sophie? 24. They didn't have anything below 24, and I want the least. That's my smallest one. So I know my least common multiple is 24. Let's look at 12 and 9. What's my first step? Natalie, what's the first step going to be? Yeah, multiply by 1, then by 2, then by 3, then by 4, by 5, by 6. Remember, you can use your assignment notebooks for this. For our 9s, first step, multiply by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6. I'm going to see if I have anything in common yet. Do you see any commons, Kylie? 36. They don't share anything smaller, so I know 36 is my least common multiple. You're going to do 8 and 10 by yourself. Let's look down at the table method. So let's do the table method for 7 and 5. So we make that table. What can I pull out for 7 and 5? Is there a number I can pull out? James?
No.
There's not. So what do you think I do? James? Yeah, that's my bottom row. Remember, I want to make that L. Well, there's no top to that L. So I multiply just the 7 times the 5. That one's least common multiple is going to be 35. So if you can't pull anything out, you just multiply them together. The next one is 6 and 14. What can I pull out of 6 and 14, Sarah?
84.
What can I pull out of 6 and 14? What can I divide out of both of them? 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 14 divided by 2 is 7. Can I divide anything out of the 3 and the 7? Nope. So now I make my L along the left and the bottom, and I say, okay, these are my numbers I'm going to multiply together. 2 times 3 times 7. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 7 is 42. My least common multiple is going to be 42. So Sarah, when you were looking at that and you said 84, that is a multiple, but it's not the least common multiple. So we have to be careful making sure that we're finding the smallest multiple that they share. Let's look at our last one. The last one is 4, 10, and 16. What number can I pull out of all three of those? Maddie?
2.
A 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now, remember when I said there's a twist with the least common multiple versus greatest common factor? With the least common multiple, I can look at 2 of the 3 numbers and see if there's something else I can divide out. What number could I divide out of at least 2 of these numbers, Adeline? Another 2. I can say 2 divided by 2 is 1. I can't do 5 divided by 2, so I'm going to bring that 5 straight down. What's 8 divided by 2? It's that 4. Is there a number that I could divide out? Again, no. 1, 5, and 4, none of them share any factors. So I'm going to make my L. And I'm going to say 2 times 2 times 1 times 5 times 4. So 2 times 2 times 1 is going to be 4 times 5 times 4. 4 times 5 is 20 times 4. 20 times 4 equals 80. So instead of having to list out all the multiples of 4 all the way up to 80, that might take a while. The table method can help it go a little bit quicker. Okay, it won't take quite as long. On our second page, you're going to be doing the work. Find that least common multiple using the method that works for you. You can list them, you can do the table method. Show your work. So for all 6 of these, you're showing your work. Then at the bottom, we're going to review the difference between greatest common factor, the GCF, and least common multiple, the LCM. So you're going to have to look, are you finding the greatest common factor or the least common multiple? Greatest common factor, least common multiple. You can look back at the previous objective if you need to review that greatest common factor. They are different. Every year I have kids confuse the two. Every year. Make sure you're paying attention. Greatest common factors are going to be numbers smaller. Least common multiple will be numbers bigger. Okay? Any questions? If you are watching this at home and you have questions, make sure you come to see me. I hope you are well, and I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.